Hi there, my name's Alex John Gilbey. I'm a PhD candidate at the School of Art, Aberystwyth University. And this paper is entitled Reading Cities Through Electronic Eyes, Street Photography in the Digital Age. And I'm going to start off with the abstract. Some of history's best known photographers spent their careers photographing the urban environment and those who lived there. For many people, the defining image of the urban environment will come from a photographer's portrait of it, such as Weegee's pictures of New York, McCullen's work in the slums of East London, or Silver and Marinovich's images of apartheid-era Johannesburg. But in an age of ubiquitous smartphones, always-on social media and constant media bombardment, what is the place of the street photographer? How have our tools changed? And what is the impact of that on the eventual work? And when anyone can take a picture, what is the place of a photographer? All of this raises the question of whether photography has really benefited from the dawn of the digital age. Is the artwork being swamped by a tide of algorithm-selected mediocrity? With the decline of print publications, who is left to fund truly incisive imagery? And when every image we see comes pre-filtered through a corporation's for-profit platform, can we really trust the evidence of our own eyes? I aim to highlight these questions through my artistic practice, including my work on recent events such as the Extinction Rebellion protests of 2019. Events organised and publicised through new media platforms, but driven by image-focused protests and online awareness. This essay makes the case for the dedicated photographer in the urban environment, drawing on my own experience of street photography and of covering urban protest. It also covers the changing possibilities of urban photography enabled by changing technology, the place of the impartial observer in protest, and the impact of online platforms on the genre. So, without further ado, let's get to it. Street photography is an urban art form. While it's a nebulous concept with many different definitions, one point that has rarely been disputed is that in order to create street photography, you need some streets. My own definition of an art form I've worked in for 5 years is similarly nebulous. Street photography can include portraiture, but it will also include the environment. It's not staged, although you may sometimes ask people to pose. Its intention is not news gathering, although the images captured may be newsworthy. The best I've yet managed is that it's the capturing of a moment which prompts an emotional response from the viewer. My own approach tends to be spontaneous. I rarely connect with the subject, although it has been known, and I tend to look for the odd notes, the things in the urban environment that don't quite fit, or the things where you know they'll be viewed as history in the making. Things are complicated further by the fact that some of the best street photographers have also been well known for their reportage work. Don McCullen is your classic example. Perceptions of cities have often been formed by the most popular images taken on those streets, and that's something that's been the case for as long as photography has existed. People thinking of New York might well have their mental picture provided by the stark, sharply contrasting monochrome images of NYC from the 1950s and 60s. The time when Weegee was tearing around Manhattan with a police radio, snapping pictures of murder victims on sidewalks, captures a few years a long time ago, but it's a part of the city's visual history that has become iconic. The same goes for the elegant interwar years in Europe, where Cartier-Bresson was coming up with street photography as a genre. Even the idea of the English as a nation of eccentrics has been reinforced by the works of Tony Ray Jones. But I have something they did not. A new wave came to photography, and its name is digital. The difference? I see it in 3 parts: technical, accessibility, reach. Technical. The things that can be done using modern digital cameras that couldn't be done with film. Access. The fact that everyone now has the ability to carry a camera and that they are more user-friendly now than they have ever been. Reach. The fact that anybody can make their image accessible to anyone else in the free world. Running through them, particularly from a street photography perspective, we immediately hit problems. There are many things I can do with the digital SLR I couldn't do with 35mm film. I can take 200 pictures in 20 seconds, lit only by streetlight, and have them viewed 2 minutes later by somebody in Japan. Well, that's fantastic for news gathering, but as we've discussed, news gathering and street photography are different, if overlapping, disciplines. Street photography isn't about taking 200 images, it's about the right image at the right moment. What is helpful, however, is the fact that I can work with light levels that would have caused a photographer 50 years ago to bite through his tripod. Cartier-Bresson would have no truck with flash photography, and on this I agree with him. On an artistic level, flash guns break the spell by intruding forcefully into the world you're merely trying to observe. On a practical level, it's not always a smart idea to be advertising what you're doing, who you're shooting, or how much expensive equipment you might be carrying. But now that our film has been replaced with ever more complex and sensitive digital sensors, we know no such limits. Cities are never truly dark. Shooting by streetlight is always possible. Over the years, my scenes have been illuminated by flood lamps, Christmas decorations, and, yeah, not a few police cars. Accessibility. It's an old truism that the best camera is the one you have with you, and by that logic we're the best equipped photographic society in history. I'm not an especial fan of camera phones, they tend to lack a lot of the features I'm used to, but a huge amount of truly spectacular work has been done with them because they're ubiquitous and can give a good result. Turning to digital cameras, digital has made things, I think, more user-friendly. Every DSLR is set up to walk the user through how it works, automatic functions are there to ease the beginner into it, and you can see immediately what's worked. And crucially, if you move quickly, you may get a second shot at capturing the image. In fact, one of the few things that hasn't shifted is price. While we may no longer be paying for film or development, equipment now becomes technically obsolete at a truly staggering rate. And reach. That picture I just took has gone all over the world. Free from national boundaries, censorship, any form of state interference, I spread my images across the globe to wherever my fellow man might be. But do I? Because if I want to use that global platform to reach the global audience, I need the platform. If I want to be seen by a lot of people, I have to use a platform that many people use. And there aren't too many of them. And they're all owned by the same handful of companies, and they're mostly run for profit. And they all use a system of complex algorithms to show people what it thinks they want to see. So to conclude, yes, there are images I can take with a digital camera that couldn't be managed on film, but the breadth of that impact can be very easily overstated. Parts of it could be seen as more accessible, but as for reach, my image can be seen all over the world, but how many people can see it is in the gift of large, for-profit media empires, just like it's always been. Let's take the theme of accessibility to move forward with. The United States Marine Corps have their credo of every Marine a rifleman, that every person in the Corps, whether they're a general, a mechanic, a filing clerk, whatever, is first and foremost a combat soldier. Well, since anyone with a smartphone can take a picture, does that mean every citizen a photographer? No. No, it doesn't. It means we can all take pictures, but I'd argue that photography is about more than that. Photography is about capturing a moment in time. It's about creation with intent. I don't call myself an artist because I own a pencil and a sheet of paper, and I have trouble with the idea of people calling themselves a photographer because they have the means to take a picture. Now, photography is an art form. It needs to be treated with just a little respect for it to be worth anything. Being a photographer isn't something you do so much as, well, something you can't help. And creation with intent is central to my argument as to why the dedicated photographer still has an active role to play. To take a good picture, you need to be in the right place at the right time. Doesn't matter if you're a professional photographer or not, and the equipment you use is irrelevant as long as it's getting the job done. But the crucial thing is that you have to realise the moment is right. If you're splitting your attention, then that's less likely to happen. If you're marching, if you're protesting, if you're just standing there with your hands in your pockets, if you're not engaged with the process of trying to create images, then you're going to miss things. And even if you're in the right place at the right time, that's no use if you're not aware of it and ready to go to work. That right time could well be measured in hundredths of a second. It's easy to miss. And a photographer, whatever their background, their training, their equipment, will be the person who realises that the moment is right. There's no other hard and fast rule. As I said earlier, plenty of great work's been done with camera phones. Many have used rangefinder cameras. Cartier-Bresson popularised the use of inconspicuous Leicas, but nobody has to be inconspicuous. Bruce Gilden famously uses close-up lenses and flash photography to ambush his subjects. Vivian Maier used twin-lens Rolleiflexes. Again, not the equipment that makes the image, it's the artist. It's also worth noting that many of the best street photographers have had no formal training in the genre. And despite what some people might like to think, constant live streaming is not a substitute. It seems to have become popular just lately, and it's very easy to see why. It gives a protest movement. My personal experience is with Extinction Rebellion, but I'm sure it's just as true with any other group, a way of connecting with the big wide world. But it's not a substitute for photography. Its intent is different. Where a photographer might look to capture the images and the split seconds, the moving image practitioner has other things on their mind. They want to capture events as they unfold, and rather than moments of individual drama, they're going to try and broadcast what's happening in a more general sense for all the good people watching at home. So yes, the role of the photographer, I think, is still a valid one. One experience that sticks in my mind was in April 2019 when I'd gone to London to see Don McCullum's retrospective at Tate Britain and run straight into the Extinction Rebellion. As you can imagine, I very quickly began photographing. I wasn't there to gather news, I was just taking the opportunity to photograph something that was vibrant, colourful, something that was making history right in front of me. As I said, it's a strength of digital photography that I could shoot all day and then edit afterwards. But it was later on, about 8:20 on the second night, that I started to look at things from a different angle. It was quite literally a different angle, because I'd been working for 14 hours. My feet were killing me, and I was sitting on the curb 20 or 30 yards from the pink yacht moored in the centre of Oxford Circus. So I was there, at ground level, when a file of police walked by to start making arrests. Now, fluorescent jackets stand out very well under low light. Now, this image is terrible as news gathering, but it's a street photograph. Now, not very long before that, I took another picture of a man holding up an XR leaflet. In that low light, I had the lens wide open, the depth of field was shallow, the background was indistinct. Again, it's a terrible news image, but people who go through my work over those days will tend to pick it out. That's a digital image. I'd have had severe trouble getting that image on film with the light as low as it was. In fact, I'd have had so much trouble capturing it that I most likely wouldn't have wasted a frame on trying. I'd have known my odds of capturing it were low, and that later on I could use that frame for something I definitely could capture. Now that brings us back to our theme of accessibility, because I've now photographed quite a few of these events, and that's made easier by the fact that digital images are always publicised online. After years of walking miles along freezing streets in all weathers, looking, searching, waiting for the images I know are there to be made, I can now find out weeks in advance where these events will be taking place. I know there'll be action and colour and history and human emotion and all the ingredients that go to making these images. I love the drama of the events, the people you meet, the tension in the air. I love the contrast of the brightly coloured signs flourished in front of lines of police. However, when I shoot these types of events, I shoot with two cameras, one digital, the other shooting monochrome film. Over a few days I will gather thousands of digital images and perhaps 100 on film, but if I take the best 3 of each, the 3 I feel are the most impactful, which sum up the day, the event, the mood, or just which I feel are the strongest. It's unusual for film or digital to be artistically better. I'll have a lot more usable digital images, that's simply how it works, but that one great image, that one moment, well, that will have been captured with whichever camera I had in my hand at the time. But that's a strength film gives to street photography. When you only have 36 exposures, you have to consider how they're going to be used. You have to wait for that extra second. You shoot more carefully, you frame more consciously. If I want to go somewhere and come back with a dozen good images, then digital is the way to go. But if I want to come back with one work of art, then it's less about your tools and more about how and where you're going to use them. That's not to say that we should all ditch our digital cameras and go back to shooting on film. It's just an easy way of saying that the digital revolution has been overhyped. Now that's been easy to do because it's accessible and it's easy to use. And also, a cynic might say, because it's meant we've all had to go out and buy new cameras. But it hasn't made us all better photographers. It's just added tools to our arsenal. To conclude, digital photography has done a number of wonderful things for photography and art in general, but that impact can very easily be overstated, especially I think in artistic terms. There are things technically possible with digital sensors rather than film, but fewer than people might think. Where digital really scores is that it makes things easier and more portable. We can take thousands of pictures, we can transmit them more easily, but as I've said, street photography is not about that. It's not about the 100 images, it's about the right one in the right second. Now, digital makes us more likely to take it, but it can't take it for us. What has not changed is that it is the artist and not the medium that really makes for a great picture. The best photographs ever taken have not used necessarily the best cameras or the most cutting-edge techniques. They were simply held by people who knew how to use them and were dedicated to the craft of doing so. And it is for that reason that the role of the dedicated photographer, while assailed on all sides, is one that I believe still has an important place. They're not necessarily a professional, just someone with an artist's eye, but the field of street photography is one that rewards the person who puts in the most hours. And I have personally lost track of how many pairs of shoes I have worn out proving that point.